And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. In the meantime, like I said before the break, we do want to move into some of the updates on the war in Ukraine as we approach the 3-year anniversary since the Russian invasion began. That date, February the 24th here. Well, Fox News correspondent Alex Hogan has a look at some of the ideas circulating out there to end the war. Let's watch.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth kicked off his first overseas trip as head of the Pentagon, arriving in Germany on Tuesday. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vice President J.D. Vance, and other high-ranking officials are also there, focusing on the war in Ukraine and pushing allies to contribute more to the fight.
The European continent deserves to be free from any aggression, but it ought be those in the neighborhood investing the most.
That's in line with President Trump's pledge to spend less money supporting Ukraine. On Tuesday, he wrote in part, quote, "The U.S. has spent billions of dollars globally with little to show." The focus on cost-cutting comes just one day ahead of a high-stakes summit where Ukraine's president is expected to plead for more weapons, ammo, and funding to fight the Russians.
It is important not to live by rumors. It is important to focus on the practical work of the team of Ukraine and the team of the United States of America on a common vision.
President Trump says his main goal is ending the fighting and claims both sides are inching closer to peace talks. But Moscow says they have yet to receive an offer to restart negotiations. And 3 years into the war, their missiles are still hitting civilian targets in Ukraine, prompting some suggestions that Vladimir Putin might be losing domestic support.
War is about making the other side's political system break. And dictatorships look like they're very strong, and then it turns out they're very brittle.
President Trump says he's also sending Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to Ukraine to discuss trading rare earth minerals for continued military support. In London, Alex Hogan, Fox News.
Alex, thanks so much. Speaking of that, I want to put up the Truth Social post on that note. Trump saying, "I'm sending Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent to Ukraine to meet President Zelensky." He says this war must and will end soon. Too much death and destruction. The U.S. has spent billions of dollars globally with little to show. He says when America is strong, the world is at peace. In the meantime here, let's talk about some of these developments with our friend there, national security analyst and expert and retired Marine intelligence officer, Hal Kempfer. He joins me. Hal, good to see you here. All right, so I feel as of late, we're talking about new ideas about getting something on the table to at least start the process of ending some of these conflicts there in the Middle East, but also there in Eastern Europe. Here's one here that I want to read to you, according to the Associated Press, and get you to comment. Ukraine has offered to strike a deal with President Trump for continued American military aid in exchange for developing Ukraine's mineral industry, which could provide a valuable source of the rare earth elements that are essential for many kinds of technology. So would this be some type of joint partnership? This would just be a trade pact or a trade agreement here in exchange for even more military support if and probably when the war continues to go on. And we would help develop this domestic industry with rare earth minerals. Help us make sense of this.
Andrew, I think the answer is yes or maybe, somewhere in between those two. I'm not quite sure because what's out there is there's $500 billion worth of rare earths, and these are things are used in televisions, high technology, wind turbines, you name it. And the issue is, which is rather interesting, the issue is that China has a real lock on a lot of these rare earths. And it just happens that that Ukraine is one of the countries or one of the places in the world that has tremendous rare earth deposits. So the U.S. is looking at this as a way, sure, I mean, part of this is to offset, sending aid and arms over there, but part of it is to deal with the threat posed by China on the global stage in terms of its lock on many of these things that are absolutely essential for modern technology and modern industry. So this is playing at many different levels. This is going on. And of course, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary going over there, really sharp guy, ran multi-billion-dollar, the Soros fund and stuff. I mean, just a brilliant a fund manager, investor, and he knows this stuff backwards and forwards and understands how to construct a deal. So when you say, will this be, some sort of joint venture or trade agreement or something like that, I think it'll have elements of all that by the time it's all said and done, if they go that way. This is in the backdrop, though, that President Zelensky has talked about. What about those seized Russian assets? And he's talked about, basically using those to pay for arms, paying for aid for Ukraine. The other thing, too, is to basically encumber them by borrowing against those assets and with repayment of future profits from those assets, something that's already been done. That precedent's already been put in place.
Sure.
And that's $300 billion plus $500 billion. Pretty soon, you've got quite a bit of money there that could be opened up potentially to help Ukraine get those back. And if I could put a little twist on this, some of the rare earths they're talking about are actually in territory currently controlled by the Russians.
Oh, interesting.
So the question becomes, so what is the end state? Is the end state to push the Russians out? And this puts a dollar and cents reason why the U.S. should help Ukraine regain that territory.
Right. I mean, you and I have talked on whether or not the, war itself, the casus belli was oil. Now we're dealing with another kind of raw material, so to speak. I wanted to ask, and this is somewhat of a political question here. President Trump is a very transactional person. It has to do with his decades in real estate and in business here. Do you see this as an ally helping an ally, or an idea that is shaking down Ukraine? Hey, we've given all this to you. Trump says you have very little to show for it with success on the battlefield. We need something in return. Is that?
I think it has been said that President Trump is rather transactional, less ideological, less motivated by pure thoughts on democracy and freedom and stuff like that, and more on just common sense business metrics, if you will. So part of it, yes, I would say very much he's looking at this, but he's also, honestly, if you go into the history of empires, whether it's the Roman Empire, Spanish Empire, whatever, you can't ignore the economic reasons why they rose to power and why they fell from power, so to speak. And that's always a big issue. The British Empire, the French Empire, it's when the balance sheet went a little upside down, you all of a sudden saw these empires contract. With the U.S., we're looking at this investment that we made in Ukraine, $180 billion, over 2 years.
Yeah.
We're also looking at what the Europeans have invested, and certainly within the White House, there's frustration that the Europeans have not provided enough. They need to do a lot more. I don't think President Trump's been too quiet about that, saying the Europeans need to do more. So he's looking at that, but he's also looking at some way to offset this. And this is pardon expression. I mean, this is my opinion. This is a pretty creative idea. And as you know, I have spent years consulting in the area of lithium and stuff, dealing with rechargeable batteries and stuff like that. So this is an area that I'm kind of familiar with in terms of some of the global economics there. And I think it's a pretty smart idea, too, because there are only so many places on the planet where you can get these rare earths, where you can get certain other things. By the way, I should also mention, we mentioned oil and gas. President Trump did mention oil and gas. That's another issue. By the way, offshore from Crimea is a huge underwater oil and gas field, and that's right now controlled by Russia. If they end up with Crimea, it'll be in the Russian exclusive economic zone. If that's turned around, it goes to Ukrainian. Again, I think President Zelensky is looking at a lot of dollars and cents things in terms of what he can offer.
So, Al, you noted it's creative here, but it is now conditional. And so we were talking about some of these new approaches in order to, give the rationale and justification for more U.S. support here. This is one of them, but it takes decades to shore up and to create a domestic industry like one as difficult as rare earth minerals. And obviously, this is just the foray into this. Treasury Secretary Bessent will be going to Ukraine to discuss that very idea. So if you're talking about transactional and conditional, the benefits might not be gleaned for so long. I mean, from the American side.
Yeah, if you're looking at a quick turnaround, return on investment, if you will, you're not going to find it. Okay. Mining stuff is always, you got to be in it for the long term. And yes, there's a lot of risk that goes with it as well. However, if you're looking at it from a political side, if you're saying, hey, look, we've cut this agreement, if the White House is going to say this, we cut this agreement, we're going to get all these rare earths, we're going to be secure in what we need in going into this extremely high-tech future, where AI and all this other that's dependent on a backbone of advanced technology, which is dependent on using all these rare earth elements to make this all happen. If you're looking at that as a political statement, I think you can probably get a pretty quick return on investment by saying, hey, look, we offset this and this is going to help us for decades and decades to come. I think that's a realistic thing to say.